afraid of the dark.
You should be.
Welcome to Binary Bylines, stories from man and machine.
Our story today is called The Body Thief. Nestled along the craggy cliffs of a sleepy coastal town, Edgewater was known for its fog-draped mornings and wind-swept shores. Visitors rarely stayed, and the locals were a tight-knit community, protective of their quiet lives and wary of outsiders. But one summer, an unusual tension began creeping through Edgewater, unspoken yet unmistakable. People whispered about neighbors and friends acting off. They'd disappear for a few days and then return with something not quite right. A distant stare, an odd turn of phrase, or a faint twitch in an otherwise familiar face. 17-year-old Cole noticed it first in his father, who'd returned home after 2 days camping in the woods with no supplies and no clear memory of where he'd been. His father, who'd always been stoic and thoughtful, now seemed unusually cheerful, almost exaggerated in his responses, laughing just a second too late. Then, there was the moment when Cole asked if they'd go fishing, and his father looked at him blankly, as if he'd never heard of such a thing. Cole, feeling the creeping strangeness of it all, gathered his friends, a scrappy bunch that included Ellis, the town's resident geek, Sasha, a true believer of the paranormal and unexplained, and Riley, the bravest of the bunch. They'd always been curious kids, eager for mystery, and this time it seemed one had landed in their laps. It was Sasha who first broached the possibility of something supernatural.
What if it's not some weird town quirk? What if it's, like, possession? Possession? Really?
Ellis scoffed, but there was a tremor in his voice.
It's not that crazy.
Sasha argued, her tone sharpening.
People vanish for a day or two and then they're not the same when they get back. Just look at Cole's dad.
Cole glanced away. He hadn't wanted to say it, but Sasha was right. His father wasn't himself. Not in the way he looked or talked or moved. And it wasn't just him. Others in town had started acting strange too. They devised a plan to search for clues, starting with a visit to the beach, where Sasha believed the first of the disappearances had begun. That night, cloaked in the cover of fog, they walked the shore, listening to the waves crash against the rocks and watching for anything unusual. They found their answer in an abandoned boathouse on the edge of the cliffs, a place they'd rarely ventured near. Its roof sagged, and its windows were dark, long since empty of any friendly light. But as they approached, a faint glow flickered from within, like firelight struggling against a gusty wind. Riley, always the boldest, slipped ahead and peered through a crack in the door. She motioned the others over, whispering,
There's something strange in there.
Inside, they found the room lit by a small fire. But it wasn't the fire that held their attention. It was the pile of tangled blankets and clothes thrown haphazardly around the room, each one seeming to hold a peculiar weight to it, as if some part of the people who wore them had remained behind. And then they saw the journal. Sasha picked it up, carefully flipping through its damp pages. The entries were chaotic, each written by a different hand, as if multiple voices were fighting to be heard. One entry caught her eye.
I thought it was just a dream at first. I'd wake up in the middle of nowhere, cold and alone. But then I saw myself. Saw my own body staring back at me with empty eyes. It wasn't me anymore. It was it.
It? What's it?
Ellis asked, his voice barely a whisper.
An entity.
Sasha said, closing the journal.
Something that can take over people's bodies. I think it only needs them to sleep.
The friends exchanged a look, the kind that spoke of both terror and understanding. They had to do something. For the next few days, they kept watch on the people they knew had disappeared and returned with that hauntingly offbeat demeanor. They saw it in their expression, their gait, and the way that they had held eye contact just a bit too long or spoken tones too light for their personalities. It was becoming clearer that the town wasn't safe, and it would soon be overrun if they didn't act. One night, as they kept watch near the cliffs, they saw a figure stumbling through the darkness. A teenage girl named June who'd been missing for 2 days. She looked around, confused, as if she didn't recognize her surroundings. When the kids approached her, she flinched, her face twisting with panic.
Where am I?
June asked, her voice shaky.
You're back in Edgewater, June.
Cole said gently, trying to calm her.
I don't know how I got here. I was just lying down to sleep and then I was gone. June, you've been missing for 2 days.
Sasha said.
Do you remember anything?
June took a shuddering breath, her hand clutching at her chest.
I don't remember much, just a shadow in my room and then everything went black. What happened next?
Ellis asked.
I was floating, I think. Floating over my own body, watching it walk around without me.
She whispered.
It looked like me, but it wasn't. It was like a shell.
They listened, horrified as June recounted her experience. She'd been trapped, unable to take back her body, watching helplessly as this thing pretended to be her, laughing and smiling with her friends and family. Eventually, she'd managed to break free, only to wake up miles away from home, cold and alone in the woods. The kids knew they had to act fast. They couldn't let this entity continue to take over people, erasing them entirely. After several late nights of research, Sasha found a way to track the entity. She explained.
The journal said it leaves a kind of trail, a residue in the places where it's been. We need to find out where it sleeps.
The next night, armed with flashlights and a strange mixture of salt and ash Sasha had concocted from folklore and, let's be honest, too many episodes of Supernatural, they followed the trail of residue that glowed faintly under a UV light they borrowed from Ellis's dad's fishing gear. The trail led them through the dense forest outside town, past twisted trees and silent shadows until they arrived at an old stone well, half hidden by ivy and moss.
This has to be it,
Riley whispered, her eyes wide. As they circled the well, they heard a low hum coming from within. Cole peered over the edge, his breath catching as he saw a strange, shifting darkness at the bottom. The entity, it seemed, was hiding here, sleeping during the day and slipping into the bodies of the townsfolk by night. Without warning, the hum grew louder, morphing into a voice, dozens of voices, layered over each other like a choir. The voices spoke in fragments, pleading and mocking, echoing the memories of those that had taken over. Help me. Don't let it take you. You'll never leave. Cole stumbled back, shaken. They couldn't destroy it, not here, not now. But they could warn the town. They could get people to stay awake, to guard against the entity and resist its power. But as they turned to leave, something shifted. A cold wind swept through the trees encircling them. Sasha screamed as the shadow at the bottom of the well surged upward, taking the shape of the very people it had possessed. Faces flickered in and out of view. June, Cole's father, and countless others, staring back at them with hollow, dead eyes.
Ha! Punch it!
Cole screamed.
Punch a shadow?
Sasha replied, sarcastically.
Okay, then run!
Cole shouted. The shadows closed on their heels, slipping through the trees like liquid darkness. The voices grew louder, filling their minds with images of their friends, their families, faces that were pleading with them to stop. The kids didn't stop running until they reached the town square, breathless and wide-eyed. Cole, Sasha, Ellis, and Riley huddled together, filled with terror as they glanced back in the direction of the old stone well. But Edgewater's quiet town square was empty. The house is dark. The streets deserted. They knew better than to let their guard down, though. The entity was still out there. They could feel it.
No one's gonna believe us.
Ellis muttered, wiping sweat from his brow.
Not without proof.
Sasha took a deep breath, then nodded.
We have to trap it ourselves.
The others stared at her, unsure of what she meant.
Look, we know it takes over people when they sleep, right? So, what if we lure it in?
Riley's eyes widened.
You're saying one of us should pretend to fall asleep?
Sasha nodded slowly, a grim determination setting in.
I'll do it. You three can keep watch. When it comes, we'll drive it back into the well.
The group agreed, though a nervous silence hung between them as they made their way back through the dense forest to the well. They positioned themselves in a circle around the clearing, flashlights ready, and Sasha sat near the well, leaning against the moss-covered stones. As the others watched, she closed her eyes, letting her breathing slow. The forest was silent. The only sound was the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. Minutes ticked by, stretching into what felt like hours. Just as Cole was about to whisper that it wasn't going to work, he felt it. A sudden, chilling shift in the air. The shadows thickened, pooling around Sasha, creeping toward her like ink seeping across a page. Ellis caught his breath, his grip tightening on the bag of salt and ash. They had agreed he'd throw it at the entity if it emerged. Then, from the well, the darkness began to rise, stretching into a cloud-like shape, its edges flickering, faces twisting and turning within its depths. The air turned sharp, thick with the scent of damp earth, as a low, distorted hum reverberated from within it. A chorus of voices layered together, pleading and mocking as though calling out from every corner of the forest. Cole's heart raced as the entity's shifting form drew closer to Sasha, reaching a dark, tendrilled hand toward her face. Suddenly she gasped, her eyes snapping open as she stumbled back, the entity's grip slipping.
Now!
She shouted. Ellis threw the mixture of salt and ash into the air, and Riley held up the UV light, casting a blinding, unnatural glow onto the shadows. The entity hissed, its form writhing and disoriented. The light was obviously causing it immense pain. It lurched backward, drawn toward the well, but it fought, its many faces flickering faster, each one looking more terrified than the last.
That's it!
Riley shouted.
It's gotta be the light. That's why it only comes out at night.
The friends moved as a single determined force, herding the entity back to the edge of the well. Cole threw a final handful of salt at it, and it recoiled with a shriek that echoed through the forest, leaving them shaken to the core. Riley kept the light focused on the shadow, screaming with determination. With one last surge, the entity was pulled back down into the darkness, disappearing into the depths of the well. Breathless, they gathered around the edge, staring down into the still shadowed water below. It was silent again. Cole swallowed, finally letting himself breathe.
Do you think it's over?
Sasha shook her head, though a faint, tired smile touched her lips.
I think we bought the town some time, but it won't stay trapped forever.
The group shared a solemn look, a sense of finality mixed with the uneasy understanding that their victory was only temporary. As they made their way back to town, a deep quiet settled over the forest. And though they couldn't hear it, a faint whisper rose from the depths of the well, a voice promising that someday it would return. So, dear listener, next time you venture out alone or feel that unsettling silence in a familiar place, remember the town of Edgewater. Remember the shadows lurking just below the surface, waiting for the moment to slip into your life, to take hold of your thoughts and twist them into something unfamiliar. Not everything that returns is the same as it was, and not every whisper should be ignored. Sleep well, if you dare. And so, dear listeners, our tales for today draw to a close. But don't be too quick to leave, for in this world of binary bylines, the stories never truly end. Shadows linger, waiting for you to return. We'd like to thank you for venturing into the unknown with us. Every chilling moment, every twist of fate was brought to life by the collaboration between man and machine. From the writing and recording to the performances and eerie melodies, all elements were crafted by Zach Nichols alongside various artificial intelligence resources, stirring the pot of creativity. All characters and elements of the stories are purely fictional, though sometimes the lines between fiction and reality can blur. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. But if you find yourself lying awake tonight, wondering, well, perhaps there's more to the story than you know. So until next time, dear listener, remember, the next tale is never far away. Keep your lights on and your mind open.